So welcome everyone to the Tasmanian Stakeholder Forum for the Energy Charter Independent Accountability Panel. In starting the meeting, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. First of all, a very definite apology for the technical difficulties in getting this meeting started, and thank you very much for your patience and tolerance. So hopefully it's smooth sailing from here. The panel might not need any introduction, but I'll do it anyway. I'm the chair, Claire Petrie. I was the former Energy and Water Ombudsman in New South Wales, and I'm currently involved with the development of a new energy tech consumer code. Cassandra Goldie, who will give us a wave, is the CEO of ACOS, and Andrew Richards is the CEO of the Energy Users Association of Australia. The panel has received disclosures from 16 signatories to the Energy Charter, and all of those are available on the IAP website. The purpose of this forum is obviously to hear from you as consumers and consumer representatives, and to hear to what extent the disclosures represent your experience during 2021. If we have people from the energy companies at this forum, they won't be speaking. They're very keen to hear directly from their stakeholders. So I've just asked them as observers to be on mute and off camera. In fact, this year, the CEOs asked if the stakeholder forums could be held first so that they could respond to what you have to say in these meetings with the panel. This is the third year of the Independent Accountability Panel's work in reviewing the disclosures of the companies that signed up to the Energy Charter. Even though it's still a work in progress, we hope that you share our view that the process has developed positively with shorter, more focused disclosures from signatories and a shorter, more focused report from our panel. As last year, we asked the signatories to provide a realistic and transparent response in their disclosures. We don't want public relations documents or to hear about actions that signatories have to undertake in any case by law or regulation. In particular, we've asked them to tell us what it really means to put customers first in terms of the culture of their company, the involvement of their board and or senior management in the charter process, their consultation with stakeholders, and their response to the recommendations in the panel's 2020 report. As we noted in last year's report, it's disappointing that AGL and Origin Energy have withdrawn as charter signatories, and we commend Energy Australia as one of the big three for their continuing commitment as a charter signatory. In contrast, there are some other large government-owned energy companies that have never been involved in the charter, a situation of poor sector leadership that we again note with regret. It's sad that in 2021, we're still talking about the impact of COVID-19, with everyone in Australia having been impacted, individuals, families, businesses, some more than others. Again, sadly, there have also been natural disasters in some areas with serious impacts, including on the delivery of energy services. But as a community advocate once reminded me, energy supply is a secondary problem if you can't afford a roof over your head, and housing stress for many people around the country has become a very real issue as well. So to be honest, the themes of this year's report are likely to be similar to those of last year: affordability of essential energy services, transition to net zero emissions by 2050 or earlier, with the consequent key issue that no customers should be left behind in that transition. So before we turn the forum over to you, I'll ask Cassandra Goldie just to talk to the affordability issue, then Andrew Richards will talk to the energy sustainability and transition issue. So Cassandra, do you want to make any
Thanks,
introductory?
Claire. And look, I'll be brief. Can I just acknowledge I'm on Gadigal land and pay respects to elders past and present. And it's really great to see colleagues from Tasmania. Those of you who were involved in this process last year will recall that at that time, there was a lot of discussion. The panel was very concerned about, of course, the variable but very serious impacts on affordability, generally for the community, but with a particular focus on people who would be considered in a whole range of ways more vulnerable. And the panel's recommendations really focused in very sharply on what we felt was needed to be put in place systemically by companies to be very actively on the front foot, including using their own data analytics to be able to identify people who were at risk as early as possible, to be prepared to track if there were going to be sort of serious accumulation of any energy debt, and to make sure that people who were at risk of being unable to afford energy to get access to their entitlements in terms of concessions or other supports. So a year ago, it was hard to predict what the next 12 months was going to look like. We know that Tasmania is a particular part of the country in terms of both challenges on affordability in a general sense, in terms of the profile of the community, but also in terms of your particular experience of the pandemic and lockdowns or not being locked down and what's happening to the local economy. Housing affordability, I don't need to say anything more about that for people who live in Tasmania. You know how serious that's become. So it would be we're really keen, of course, to hear your particular perspectives on what you think has been done well over the last 12 months in light of the recommendations from the panel, but also your own views, and also, as importantly, what was not done well, and to what extent you want to see a strengthening of an approach or a very different approach to being prepared to support people generally about affordability, but with a particular focus again on people who are most vulnerable. So we really just encourage you to be as clear, as frank as you can be. And I just want to thank advocates for turning up today, because it's another Zoom meeting and you have worked extraordinarily hard. We know that, in terms of the, supporting people in the community. And so we're very grateful for you putting this time in today to provide this feedback. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Cass. Andrew?
Thanks, Claire. And just recognising I'm on Wurundjeri land today. So for those of you who don't know, the EUAA represent large commercial and industrial customers. So I'm here as a business representative in part. We talked last year about net zero by 2050, and it's just, for many, it was a bit of an abstract concept at that time. I think 12 months down the track, it is very much embedded now in community and politics and progressively in policy. And that has, I guess, ramifications, not only for large industry that I represent, but also for vulnerable customers. And I think one of the things that we're wanting to focus on is to make sure that we have a just transition to net zero by 2050. Or probably earlier would be my guess, and to make sure, as Claire said, that no customer gets left behind. So transition to net zero or something similar has an opportunity, presents an opportunity for a lot of people, but could also entrench vulnerable customers in their lot, and that's not what we want. We want to lift them out, use technology to lift them out of that. I noticed there was a really good piece of work yesterday, Cass, I think it was you were part of it, around energy efficiency on rental properties and on low income properties. And I think that's those sorts of things to make sure we're tackling vulnerability and energy poverty and making sure we're lifting everybody up simultaneously, I think is a real challenge. I've got no doubt that we'll meet net zero by 2050, if not sooner. What I'm worried about and what keeps me awake at night is, do we get there at least cost for consumers? And do we get there in the most equitable and just way that's possible? So that's part of the challenge. The other big challenge coming along is that we're putting lots of new poles and wires and power stations all over the countryside now. And energy is no longer something that's down the road in the Latrobe Valley, as you hear in Victoria or elsewhere, but it's in people's backyards. And that includes the power lines that takes the power from wind farms and solar farms and other things to major load centres. So we've also got to be concerned and work hard on those people who are impacted by the change in their daily life. We do a lot of work with AEMO around their integrated system plan and taking it from a large integrated system plan from lines on a map to boots on the ground is now starting to have a significant impact on communities. So we need to consider what that actually means as well, and making sure that, once again, those that are impacted are looked after and are a beneficiary of the major transition that's going on. So our focus is to make sure that everyone gets lifted up and no customer gets left behind. So I'll leave it with that at that, Claire, and hopefully we can have a conversation about that in part.
Thanks, Andrew. So look, now it's over to you. We're really keen to hear about your experiences during 2021 and the feedback that we can pass on to the CEOs of signatory organisations. We know that things are different in Tasmania with lack of competition, and you probably have a far more direct relationship with your energy providers than most other states, but your experience is really valuable. So I'll ask someone to start, and if you don't mind just identifying yourself when you speak, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So who'd like to start? Can I call on Taz Koss, perhaps? Oh, yes, no, go. Well, Duncan, thank you.
Unmute myself first. We do have some more.
Sorry, Duncan, can you just introduce yourself?
1 minute, I'll turn this phone off. Hi, I'm Duncan Livingston. I'm an energy management consultant in Tassie. We only focus on business. However, we do a lot of advocacy as well, and work with a lot of not-for-profit organisations voluntarily as well. So we have a very much a community-based ideal, and we do a bit of robbing from the rich to help the poor. So we donate either time or money to local Tasmanian charities as well. So while my focus is primarily on the business, consumers, everyone, and also has domestic electricity accounts, and the majority are with Aurora Energy. There's a few wonderful things that have happened, I guess, which most people tend to think is happening through Aurora. The electricity prices have come down because the Tasmanian electricity regulator realised the prices were too high and reset pricing. So all the retailers have passed that through. So you've got Aurora Energy, you've got First Energy, and a new one that started in July, Elysian, in Tassie. So there's now consumer choice, and they're all offering quite low rates. One of the things that Aurora did extremely well was making sure that the state government COVID payments got passed through and bill waivers happened. That was it probably happened to more companies than it really should have. Some very large companies ended up receiving it as well, but the thing that was important at that time was haste and getting things out. So Aurora have done really well helping businesses and small businesses on that. One of the things that unfortunately I have seen, and it continually gets fed back to me by our client base, is Aurora removed the free online portal for people to go and check their bills and look at their energy use, and have replaced that with a service where it's 30 cents a day. The Aurora app. Now, in response to last year's complaint about that through this forum, Aurora did review that, but decided not to replace or reinstate the free service. They've been giving customers 3 months for free, so they're giving them, and then after that 3 months, if they don't cancel it, then they have to pay the extra 30 cents a day. Now, that has been hurting small businesses and consumers, and we still think that is wrong, and that Aurora should make sure that people have the option to opt out easily. But apart from that, they're actually doing a good job.
Thank you. That's good to hear, and thank you for those very helpful comments, Duncan. Who would like to go next? Would Tascos like to? Stephen, would you or Lucy like to give us your views?
Do you want to go first, Lucy, or?
I'm happy at this point just to kind of sit back and listen. This is my first forum, so I'm happy for Steve to make a comment, but I also noticed that Jeff just took off mute, so I wonder whether Jeff has something to say before Tascos chips in.
I'm happy to make a contribution. Jeff Fader, Chair, Tasmanian Small Business Council. I bring you an early apology from Robert Mallett, my CEO, who actually does all the work in this area and is closely connected with both our suppliers and, of course, our clients, customers, and the small business community of Tasmania. First quick point is support Duncan regarding the close relationship and a good working relationship with Aurora down here. They go out of their way to keep us informed. They certainly invite input, comment, and look, it's hard to make an assessment of how well one is heard. Here's Robert's just joined us. How well one is heard by Aurora. But in general, the responses appear to be very positive. The comment Duncan made about the charges for access to details of your energy consumption are absolutely online, and we would believe that Aurora should make that service available free. It's hard to understand how you can make informed decisions if you can't actually measure on a timely manner the information. So failing that, you just back to guesswork, or as was suggested, you pay some money every day. Perhaps the biggest issue for us in Tasmania comes down to two things. Well, the entire stream of energy supply from production, distribution, and retail sale is controlled by one owner, although there may be three separate trading entities, and therefore decisions are made generally at a political level. Robert and I both sit on the Energy Ombudsman with to review the work as it comes through, recommendations, proposals, and perhaps have some contribution to Otter's deliberation and decisions that are made. We believe that we've been able to have some influence. So I think hopefully Robert will agree with a nod of his head. Good, thanks, Robert. But we have the biggest problem down here is a looming problem not just for the small business community, but for every consumer in Tasmania. And that relates to the proposals around the Marinus link. While the discussion is about, in quotes, Marinus, Behind that is a huge investment in transmission lines, which under current arrangements will end up being paid for by Tasmanian consumers. Nevertheless, the net value based on the information produced by both Aurora and Tas Networks is that Tasmanian consumers will get about 6% of the value or benefits if and when they flow through, with a huge component to cost.
If I might just interrupt you there, there has been a change in the way that Mariners Link will be paid for. The AEMO have devised a formula based on the states which will benefit most, and so now Tasmania will only be paying that small percentage that we will benefit from. So it's not, we were listened to, and it's been looked at, so no, we won't be paying for it all.
It's been looked at, but has there actually been a rule change? Does anybody else know? Andrew,
There's been no rule change. This is a significant issue that's been brought up at energy ministers' meetings now for the last 12 months. Basically, you need to get a significant rule change going through. You basically have to change the entire TUOS regime. And that requires state ministers to agree. So it requires a state minister in Queensland, in his own words, to cross-subsidise Tasmania. And as a quirk of the national electricity rules, and any rule change needs to go through the South Australian Parliament as well. It's a bit of a quirk, but I think this has got a long way to go to try and justify spreading the costs across all jurisdictions. My best guess at this stage is, Rob, that the federal government will end up tipping in a fairly substantial amount of money, so that because it is a significant project, it's a long-term project. And it's not only, you're right, it's Jeff, it's not only Mariners Link, the undersea cable, but there's also substantial on-island transmission upgrades required to get the juice from the power stations to Mariners Link in the first place. So there's going to be a significant amount of on-island work that needs to be done as well. But I think that my best guess is the feds will have to tip in with at least $1 billion to underwrite it to make it happen.
It would have to be. So, Duncan, you're quite right. There has been the matrix has been drawn up as to which state will and how much they will benefit by it, but there's been no agreement on it. And I'd have to look, it's all crystal ball gazing, and I suppose it's just, that's the world of advocacy in which we're in. But if Tasmania expects to be 200% renewable, by 2040 or whatever, and the Australian government's still having issues with their climate change policies, etc., etc. I'm sure that they'd very much like to have Tasmania's excess renewable energies put into their national grid that then brings down the national average, rather than just our water going down and the wind just flying past the turbines and being of no real value because we can't do anything with it. So,
I think eventually, Robert, there's the Mariners Link will be built, Snowy 2.0 will be built, Battery of the Nation will be built, because we can't be switching off all the thermal generation and just replace it with wind and solar. You need other forms of technology to support that. So it's around the quantum, the size of the investment, and the timing of the investment that seem to be the key things. There's a lot of risk associated with these big long-term projects. They're 70-year projects. And that's why I think there's probably going to have to be a role for government to underwrite it. A federal Labor government, not that I'm here to try and change political views, but federal Labor have announced a $20 billion underwriting scheme that for networks particularly, because they see this as an issue. So yeah, I'm glad someone brought Mariners up, because I was going to ask about that and how people were feeling about it. I know it's a big topic down there.
Well, I'll give my view is that regardless of what we do as advocates, it's going to be built. There's so much political will. Hydro Tasmania and the Tasmanian government have been wanting to do something like this for about 40 years. And finally, the people who wanted to do it are in the right places in power, and it's going to happen no matter what we do. Is it a good idea? I don't think so. It's a much better idea to have battery or energy storage close to the source somewhere on the mainland. Build lots of smaller ones, but it's a big project. Political will get behind it and it'll happen. And so we've just got to make the best of us. It'll pay itself off eventually. And I don't believe it's going to be a significant cost, because it won't go ahead if Tasmania has to pay for it all. It won't be economically viable. So if it's spread across the nation and into those areas, then yes, let's let it go ahead and have it as part of the solution that's moving forward. Personal opinion.
The other option that's under active consideration too, so that people know, is that for at least part of it, because they're contemplating building this in 2 stages, at least one of the stages to potentially be a non-regulated asset, so a merchant asset. So therefore it won't appear on energy bills. It'll be incorporated in whoever's using that link to dispatch power or to move power around. So I think there is a lot of contemplation as to how it gets paid for. One of the few benefits, if you like, of having government ownership of everything is that when Hydro Tasmania make a lot of money out of selling spot hydro into the Victorian market, that goes back to the Tasmanian government as a dividend, and hopefully you get lots of hospitals and roads and those sorts of things built, and they can actually do some good with the dividends. There's one sort of virtuous circle that I hope will happen.
Or affordable housing, perhaps.
Or affordable housing.
Yeah. I mean, we're, as a panel, we're agnostic on all of this, actually. I think our main purpose in this sort of, government owned or non-government owned, I think it's always in the evidence about actually the outcomes for consumers. I'm particularly interested in this discussion and to any of the consumer advocates about whether in the sort of, upstream pipeline work on this particular project, whether you're confident that the issues of equity and the interests of lower income consumers are being represented. Because often what can happen with this is the dice gets rolled and you're trying to retrofit a fix further down the track. So as Andrew was saying at the opening, as we, in our sort of roadmap, whatever that roadmap looks like, if we don't get design right, it will mean that people on lower incomes are increasingly left out of the benefits that flow from, these kinds of projects. So I just want to check whether you've got any views about that in terms of the design and equity issues associated with this one. I'll take that, Duncan, as a we don't know or not yet. Is that your view?
I'm just thinking about how the components make up the bill. So the network costs in Tasmania are currently probably about 40-50% of the cost. We do have a high cost network to maintain. Tas networks have been reducing their tariffs over the past 5 years. So regardless, anything that increases the cost to the network is going to be passed through. So there is a very real potential for that to increase costs on electricity bills for everyone. And it's probably going to be going up. That I would assume that after 5 years and about 30-40% cuts in tariff costs, that can't keep happening. So we are going to see those costs increase regardless. It's just how quickly.
Yes, Sandra, can I just make a point regarding all this? Our power bills are, perhaps,
could you introduce yourself?
My name's John Pawley. I'm president of CODA Tasmania.
Thank you.
Our power bills are made up of 3 components, basically. There's the wholesale cost of electricity, there's the transmission and distribution component, and then there's the retail component. I think it's important when we're looking at these things that we understand that the retail component is highly regulated, and our pricing regulator provides a cost to serve. It provides for the cost of metering, and it provides a number of other components which are built into the regulated tariff that is available. And that cost to serve component is about 37.9 cents. And that provides for all the retail functions that Aurora performs. As Duncan said, the transmission bit is about 45% of our energy bill. And that is highly regulated, and that's based on a return to the asset that Tas Networks have in place. And Duncan said earlier that there's been a pass-through of lower energy costs, and that's primarily because of a reduction in wholesale prices from generators. And it's important to understand how each of those bits fit together, particularly when we're talking about something like Marinus. In Tasmania, we already see Marinus falling into two very clear components. One bit is the link to the mainland from where it leaves the Tasmanian onshore, and the other bit is the upgrading to the Tas Networks grid to actually get renewable energy from the various renewable projects around Tasmania to that point. At the moment, it appears that Tas Networks will own that onshore transmission infrastructure and is likely to use that infrastructure to supplement its transmission activities in Tasmania. So it looks like that might end up getting factored into our consumer bills down here. In relation to Marinus Link, I think in the national energy market, as we get more and more extensions to the national electricity grid, we have to rethink about how these elements are priced and whether or not they become a part of the wholesale price that is bid into the market, because and we all know this, that when the sun's shining and the wind's blowing, the marginal cost of renewable energy is zero. But if consumers around the country are having to pay a significant component of their bills to provide for the transmission to new locations, is the marginal cost of that energy actually zero, or is it being bundled into consumer bills? And Marinus is really perhaps one of the first examples of that. And I think we've heard very strongly that Tasmanians will only get a very small direct benefit from it. Most of the benefits will flow to the national energy market. And so it's a good case study to rethink about, what proportion is part of traditional transmission and what proportion is really part making it look like a generator in the system. And
thanks, John. It's a very useful. This is sort of the foreshadowing and showing where actually we need to put some much greater effort into the questions of design and negotiation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from the perspective of Tas Networks, they're undertaking a lot of consultation with consumers in Tasmania, and being very open about it.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I suppose, Cassandra, and I haven't heard from Stephen or Lucy, so looking forward to that in a second on this issue. But don't forget, we were talking, because they are all state-owned, the state then can determine how it then reimburses or supports the people who are having issues. They're not private retailers in the main. We have two or three. They represent less than 10% of the market, I think, at the moment. So effectively the state-owned corporations can then choose through the state-owned retailer, which of course is an Energy Charter member, signatory, they can then choose how to reimburse that. So there'll be sectors of the community who it's not going to affect all that much, bit extra price, they can afford it, whatever. There will be those less able to do it, and they will be supported, I would imagine, through what we've had for some years, both colours of a reasonably benevolent government, although Tascos might argue that toss on that particular point.
Thanks, Robert. I think that's one of there's a much clearer line of a responsibility to deal with these issues, I think, in that kind of structure.
So there's the challenge to Tascos, benevolent or not?
So on the issue of Tascos, we've got concerns around what it's going to mean for residential customers and electricity prices. As a project, big infrastructure project, that's good. Provide more renewable energy to the mainland, that's good. Decarbonise the mainland economy, solve a problem up there, good. Lots of infrastructure, construction, building happening in the state, economic development, good. If you spend $3.5 million on anything, you will get
billion, Stephen.
Billion. You'll get that economic benefit, whether it's a pipeline across Bass Strait or thousands of houses. So putting all of those things aside, what we don't know is what it's going to do to residential prices, and we can't be told because there are still all these questions around the who pays, who's going to pay for the actual 3.5 billion for the pipeline, and the modelling by Tas Networks shows that it'll reduce wholesale prices, but then Tas Networks has also said that we're going to pay for the transmission of it. So how that's going to balance out in terms of residential prices, we don't know. Tasmanian households don't need Marinus. We're already at 100% renewable energy, electricity generation capacity, plus we've got Basslink as well to support that. So in terms of meeting household needs, we don't need Marinus. So Hydro want it, as we've already heard, so they can do their battery of the nation. Tas Networks want it because they want to build a big pipeline. Wind farm developers want it so they can set up wind farms and sell their energy into the mainland. So they should pay for it, is the basic question. And if households get a benefit from that, well, that's good, because we've spent 100 years of our taxes and power bills setting up our renewable energy generation system. So we should benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
I think in addition, Cassandra's point about the design process is really important from a slightly different perspective. In addition to the costs, there's also the infrastructure impact. So that raises questions for us around the social license to operate for this particular development and the right for people to say not in my backyard, which, given Duncan's, I think, accurate comment about it being a foregone conclusion because there is so much political backing to it. We know that historically these kinds of big infrastructure developments happen in the regions that are some of the most low income and experience the highest rates of vulnerability and disadvantage, which intersects with populations who historically also don't have a strong voice. And we know that there are issues around this because at the Tasmanian Energy Development Conference in Devonport, delegates were met with protests about a wind farm and people not wanting that built in their backyard. And I'm foreseeing similar issues around the infrastructure development happening in people's communities where it might not be welcome. And so the approach that the state government and other stakeholders are taking to make sure that people have a right to be heard and that what they say is actually listened to and incorporated into decision making will be a crux of how Tasmanian communities who are most impacted, not just by cost, which is distributed across our entire community, but by physical infrastructure impact and the impact that that has on communities, especially in terms of tourism, is a very real problem. And I guess I'm not convinced that that's been appropriately addressed from an equity perspective quite yet.
Thanks, Lucy. Look, while both you and Stephen are commenting, do you want to speak to what has happened on the general issues of affordability, impacts of COVID, the commentary, I think, from Duncan and from Jeff, that the general view is that Aurora has done very well, with the exception of this issue about the pricing over the digital platform, which was a theme last year. So can I just come to both of you about your observations on for residential consumers, where you think things are at?
Steve, you kick it off.
Probably just to endorse the comments of everyone else and have similar thoughts. We've been very pleased with our engagement with Aurora. We have a good working relationship with them and very pleased with the way they engage with us. So that's been very helpful. At the time of COVID, Aurora set up its customer support fund and its supports around energy affordability, and we've touched on some of those as well. Obviously, Aurora Plus is an issue for us. Aurora know that, and we've had many discussions around that as well. I do notice they have taken on board some further feedback in their revised submission or revised disclosure in how they're going to relook at the pricing of the Aurora Plus product. And I did see Amy was on the line. I don't know if this is an appropriate opportunity for her to comment around that a bit more, or to take that offline another time. Yeah, we see the Aurora Plus product as an important tool for customers to have some greater access around their energy usage, their ability to manage their bills, and especially given that the online portal was taken down and replaced with this fee product. There's an issue of access to customer data there, but then also the issue that those that can afford the product get the benefits that it brings in terms of lower bills, managing usage, and those that can't afford it, those on lower incomes, don't have that same opportunity. So there's an equity issue there as well.
So Stephen, presumably you feel like you've done your very best to persuade Aurora to drop the pricing, and at the moment you haven't got the result that you're after yet. Would that be right?
Not yet, no.
Yeah.
No.
And do you
so
have
Aurora, sorry, I was just going to say, Aurora did remove the product fee for customers in its hardship program. We would have liked to have seen an extension of that the fee be removed for concession customers, but ideally our end game is that the fee is removed for all customers.
And do you have a view about the use of the sort of 3-month free period? That can often be one where actually, can be a marketing tool that gets people in, and then people don't realise the price is being baked into their bill. Have you got concerns about that, or do you think it's on balance a better result than fee from the beginning?
I think it's a reasonable marketing tool. I mean, Aurora does not hide the fact that there's a fee attached to it. They do promote it as a very insignificant fee, and that the benefits you get from the app outweigh the fee. And if a 90-day free trial is a way that people can try that for themselves and make a decision about whether they get the benefit from it or not, that's a fair marketing tool, I think. But as you say, the trap is if it gets people in and then they don't realise that they're continuing, that they're locked into this fee, that they're then not aware that they're continuing to pay. That's an issue.
I would have to ask on that one. Have you had any feedback from Aurora as to the success of people saving more money than it costs them?
Not quantitative data, no.
It's, I was going to say, it's obviously it's really great to hear that very positive feedback about Aurora over the last 12 months in terms of really making sure that the affordability issues were being dealt with. From this point, can you foreshadow whether you think, or the arrangements are in place to protect people most at risk over the next 12 months, or are you concerned that some of the supports might start to fall away?
Who you want to answer? Oh, it's Kiel. I think, in fact, the will of the government, even though they're recently re-elected for another 4 years, give or take, the will of the government and also the past experiences with Aurora demonstrate that everything that can be done will be done to support those most at risk. Aurora has up to now put a lot of time and money into ensuring that people are supported. Their communications process to me as an individual, and I presume well and truly to Tascos, and I'm not sure about COTA, they're regular with their correspondence and their genuine desire to see, is there any more we can do? What should we be doing to make sure it doesn't go pear-shaped? So, as I say, my experiences from that point of view demonstrate that no matter what, over the next difficult COVID coming out of it, and Tasmania's going to have it tougher than we've ever had it before when we do open up, because we're completely virus free and we've lived a normal life now for in excess of 12 months. It will be tough once we open up and there are some cases. That's when the Auroras of the world and the government will start to need to sharpen their pencil a little bit and work out exactly what they're going to do to support those people who become at risk as a result of greater freedoms from the rest of the country.
Stacey Milbourne, you're from the Salvation Army and you're a direct frontline service. What's your experience? What's your answer to Cassandra's question about how they've dealt with, Aurora has dealt with people under financial stress, and how do you see the future?
From our experience, we've actually got a great working relationship with Aurora. Aurora have been very proactive and also being proactive in coming out to probably one of our most challenging emergency relief centres and being there on the ground, talking to clients, working with clients, looking at what's going on, volunteering in that space, the team coming out and volunteering. We work closely with Aurora with some funding from Aurora to actually have to be able to employ someone to work with people experiencing hardship in relation to their energy bill with Aurora, to be able to work through that, do budgeting with them. So we get referrals from all around the state. There's a lot of crossover between those clients and our clients that are coming through our centres for emergency relief. Anti-Poverty Week's coming up soon. I'm a bit of an advocate for Anti-Poverty Week. It's the opposite of poverty isn't wealth, it's actually justice for people. And Aurora have partnered with us to put on an Anti-Poverty Week event in Anti-Poverty Week, and it's called Bring In Your Bill. Oh, sorry, the name's just been changed and I can't think of the new name, but we will have people from Aurora on site for the general public to bring in their energy bill, to sit with people from Aurora to work through what's happening with their bill, where they can look at savings, where they can look at payment plans. I think the incentives that Aurora have had from COVID in relation to people, and we have clients that have got huge energy bills, but Aurora have been very proactive with their incentives in relation to connecting with people to try and open that conversation, because quite often our clients don't want to know about it. It's like, if we put it over here, it'll go away. Well, it's not going to go away, it's just going to grow. But they've been very proactive in working in relation to what's an affordable payment plan for people. And whilst it might be a slow chipping away, at least it's giving people back some control and they're able to make some payments. I'm just looking at the other, the 30 cents a day for the app is actually going to exclude quite a few of our clients, being able to access the Aurora Plus app in that space as well. And my thoughts are that I think the 90-day free trial is really good, but rather than have it continue on, I think maybe if we flipped it around, or if Aurora could flip it around and people had to actually opt in to continue it. So at the end of the 90 days, it just stops, and then people have that choice of taking it up, rather than not realising that they're now all of a sudden they're paying for it in that space. So rather an opt-in than an opt-out scenario in that space. Yeah, look, I actually think going forward that we'll continue to work closely with Aurora. We're doing that now. We've had Aurora come along to our statewide team meeting and just giving out the information as to what is available for clients that our facilitators may not have been aware of previously as well. It's opening the door, and that communication, I think, is extremely important for everyone, because we can then pass that on to our community members coming in seeking help. We're encouraging community members when they do come in to engage with Aurora or whoever their energy provider is, to ensure that they are opening that door to see what that, you know, I guess to remove a little bit of the fear, and advocating and supporting them through that process. We also administer the Energy Hardship Fund that is state government funded, and we have TASCOS sitting on the reference group for that as well. So so we've so we have that dispersed around the state to different providers as well. But yeah, I mean, I think going forward, I think what Aurora have done over the last 12 to 18 months in that community engagement side of the business has been invaluable in that space from my perspective. Yeah.
Can I just jump in and clarify something? The Aurora Plus app fee is 11 cents a day. Are we talking about something different with 30 cents a day?
Sorry, I thought I heard 30 cents.
Yeah.
That could, sorry, but yeah, look, even 11 cents a day is going to be an issue for our clients.
Yeah.
And in particular,
I agree,
for our
but
clients
we should at least get the right
that
figure.
don't actually have the phone or the data to be able to access the app either in that space. But yeah, sorry, that's my bad. Sorry, I don't know where I picked up 30 cents a day.
Sorry.
Duncan said it initially, so I just wanted to make sure we're talking about the same thing, not something different.
Yeah, sorry, my apologies. But yeah, I think personally an opt-in is better than an opt-out. That's all, because with our client base, there's so many other stresses for most of them in their day-to-day life. This is something that would not be front of mind for them after that 90 days to have to make a contact to then opt out in that space.
And I think the comment that, you know, 11 cents a day is not that much, which I think seems to be something that I've heard from Aurora and some other stakeholders, is perhaps an unconsidered one. If these people are choosing between paying their energy bills and having healthcare for their children or putting food on the table, 11 cents a day maybe doesn't seem that much when you say it and you're sitting from a position of working full time in a well-paid job. But contextually for our constituents, it really does add up. So I think really endorsing what Stacey says about it being a real barrier for some of her clients, especially and the broader community experiencing low incomes.
Because what we're seeing in the state, well, whilst it's a little bit off to the side, but in relation to community members trying to currently now that are seeking bond assistance, there's a specific formula, and if a certain percentage of your income will be going to your rent, you don't actually qualify because it's not sustainable. But given the current housing market and rental market in Tas, everyone's, much if you're on income support, is sitting above that threshold. So where they really need that bond assistance, they're not getting it. So that 11 cents a day is crucial, because we've got people currently trying to decide whether they pay their rent, whether they buy food, or if they pay for their power.
Can you imagine the fallout if Aurora...
say at this point, we'll probably take this up when we have our dialogue with Aurora again. Robert, yep.
Can you imagine the fallout if Amazon chose to charge for people to be able to use their apps so they can do business with them? You know, it just doesn't make sense.
Cassandra, can I make some points here from Coda's perspective around this? I want to really start firstly by really congratulating Aurora on the support they've provided during COVID, like everyone else has. And also, as Stacey's just outlined, the YES program is an absolutely fantastic service that Aurora provide. But I think that there's a few things we're missing in this discussion. And it's not just in the energy space, it's most probably across government. We're very quick to spend very large amounts of money on acute interventions, i.e. we wait until somebody is in trouble and then we will throw a lot of money and resources at them to help them get out of trouble. And the YES program is a really good example of that. It provides people who have got themselves into trouble with their electricity bills with a lot of support, which is going to help them more generally. But we seem very reluctant on improving energy literacy. And I think this is where the Aurora app, Aurora Plus, is missing the point. We've got about 200,000 retail customers in Tasmania. In about 2 years, we have 30,000 of them have signed up for the app. So about 15% in 2 years. And that's in an environment where if you go onto the Aurora website, you are pushed towards the app if you want to do anything. I even get adverts for the Aurora Plus app on my YouTube feeds. It's very heavily marketed. It's in the newspaper, full page ads. And it seems to me that instead of using the app to improve energy literacy and to improve people's understanding of their bill, it's being used to try and generate additional revenue. I think somebody said it's only 11 cents a day. I think we've got to realise that we only pay 37.9 cents a day for Aurora's retail services that we get, and that covers billing. It covers their call centre. It covers what's left of the free service. And so when you think that everything Aurora Plus does can be accessed by making a phone call to the call centre and talking to a person, all the information that's in the app is on the screen in front of a call centre operator. All the information that's in the app can be obtained if you fill in a form on the replacement for Aurora Online. And in fact, I did that earlier this week. I filled in the form. I wanted to know what the balance was on my bill. And 24 hours later, somebody in Aurora had gone into my account, had looked at what my balance was, and then sent me an email back. So in effect, what we've got is, with Aurora's focus on the app, they now have they've created a duplication of information systems within Aurora. And you could almost say this is typical monopoly activity, where somebody has a regulated price based on the cost of production. They have the management of the data systems to provide information to the call centre operators. They have spent an awful lot of money creating a very clunky forms-based inquiry system where every time you want to make an inquiry, you have to put your name, you have to put your address, you have to put your account number, you have to put your secret code every time. And then they've spent an awful lot of money on Aurora Plus. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if the web interface for Aurora Plus is virtually identical to what a call centre operator sees. And in fact, if you were a company like Aurora, why wouldn't you make the web interface for Aurora Plus be what the call centre operator sees, except giving them a bit more access to not just one person's account, but the person they're talking to account. So it seems to me they've got to focus on trying to generate revenue by selling something rather than generating revenue by getting people to better manage their bill cycles. For example, I pay my bill every week. I have a direct debit. And because I have a direct debit, instead of paying 11 cents per day, I get 5.5 cents per day discount on my bill. And I do that because I don't want to have bill shock. Aurora gets a huge benefit from that because they're getting money up front. And I'm something like $300 in credit. Now, Aurora can be earning money on that. And, you know, just some of the sums I've done, if they offered Aurora Plus free and encouraged consumers to pay their bills weekly or monthly, they would end up getting more than $40 a year in terms of reduced financing costs. So it seems the marketers have ruling the day. So I think we really, we all tend to focus on the cost of Aurora Plus rather than looking how Aurora Plus could be used as a tool to improve energy literacy in Tasmania. And that's very important, as we've heard from Tascos and Stacey, and as we know at COTA, for people who do have a significant dependency on energy. A couple of other things I wanted to mention. In Aurora's statement, they say they've proactively contacted about 10,000 customers who are eligible for a free tariff change. Now, they don't say how they've contacted them. They don't say what assumptions are behind them contacting them. And they've talked about their right plan calculator. So I went on to the right plan calculator this week and I just did it on my bill just to see what it would say. I currently don't have off-peak, I'm just on the fixed tariff. And the right plan calculator came up and said, oh, well, my quarterly bill as it is at the moment is $410. If I move to off-peak and peak tariff, my quarterly bill would be $310. So I sat down and thought, well, what are the assumptions behind this? And it would require me to do, if I was paying for Aurora Plus, it would require me to consume 73% of my electricity in the off-peak. I don't know how I could do that. But the more important point, there's nothing public about the assumptions that are behind those calculators. And in fact, on the calculators, Aurora don't provide any guarantee that you're actually going to achieve that outcome. So it's a bit like if you've ever been to the US and whenever there's an ad for a drug, there's always a rider that says actual results may vary. And it seems to me that that calculator could be the same, but it would be nice that when organisations like Aurora put a calculator up, that somewhere you can go to a document that says this is exactly the formulas, rather than just relying on a black box. While everybody might not want to go to that, people like myself and perhaps Duncan may want to see how the sums are being done.
John, that's really useful in terms of, you know, also that, because one of the recommendations of the panel was for companies and providers, retailers, to make sure that people are on the best plan and to be active about that. And so it is tricky, but it's really good to get those insights into what could be improved there. And I'm just conscious of time, Claire, but we haven't touched on anything that has happened about reducing the energy use. side for consumers, including energy efficiency. That's part of it, of course. But if there's any comments on that front, just before we start to come to the end, I'd be really grateful for any views on that. And maybe just also, Stacey, hearing, you know, what you've talked about in terms of those really positive developments about collaboration, community collaboration, to what needs to be done to make that actually systemic and durable for the long term, making the most of the last period of crisis, yeah, and going, well, and this works and we want to keep this going. Anything you want to say on that front would be great.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's almost like a bit of I guess I hesitate to say like a bit of practice going forward. And for me, it's been quite enlightening to be able to have that communication. I think it's amazing how engaged Amy and Mark's teams are in relation to really coming out to the coalface and talking to people and listening to those lived experiences with people, because it's well and good for us all to say this is happening, but when you actually hear it from people that are going through it, who have to make that choice between, you know, do we feed the children this week? Do I heat or do I keep them warm? What are my choices in this space? Because people are doing it really tough out there. And Lucy and Stephen and John, you would also be aware of that. So I'm trying not to preach to the converted, but I think if we can keep that communication open and if Aurora can keep that, I guess, this community engagement that they've commenced, if we can keep that going and we can enhance that, and we as providers can support that and open the door for them to be able to come in and meet with people. So we have as much responsibility in this space as what Aurora do as the energy provider in opening those doors to keep that communication free flowing backwards and forwards in that space. Yeah.
Duncan, you're...
Sorry about that. I just want to get a feeling here. We are talking about Aurora. Aurora is a charter, have signed up to the charter, but there are other electricity retailers in Tasmania. So I think if you're an RACT member, you get 6% discount off your electricity usage rates, and with First Energy and the RACT partnership, plus their Aurora Plus app is free. They don't charge extra for it. So you pay 6% less and get the app for free. Are you inviting the other retailers along to these same things as Aurora, or Aurora just using this as a marketing platform where they're recommending the best plan, when in fact the best plan might be to change to a different retailer?
Duncan, just so in relation to the Energy Hardship Fund, last financial year, First Energy came on as another provider that will benefit from the energy. So clients with First Energy will now also benefit through the Energy Hardship Fund as well. So we have an MOU in place with them. Aurora have actually been quite proactive in reaching out to us to engage with us. We've not had that same engagement with First Energy at this stage, but as I just said, it is also our responsibility. So I'll take that on notice, and I will actually reach out to see if they're open to doing anything along the same lines as what Aurora has currently been doing as well. So they're so we've got Aurora, Tasgas and First Energy, the three providers at this stage that we can provide Energy Hardship Fund support to for people that are coming in and to our outlets, and the providers seeking that assistance. We can.
And for very large consumer residential energy users, the new provider Elysian, I'm currently with First Energy, used to be with Aurora, and in a couple of weeks I'll change over to Elysian because I like to try everyone out to figure out if they're any good. For someone with a large home electricity bill, their rates are fantastic. So yeah, I've done calculations for some residential clients where they might save 30% on their bill.
Thanks, Duncan. I have not had any interaction with Elysian at all at this stage. I haven't. No.
Now we are rapidly running out of time, so I want to make sure that anyone who hasn't spoken or wants to add anything else can do so. So are there any sort of final comments that you'd like to make?
Just one comment. We're just about to go into a new energy world with the legislation of consumer data rights in the energy space following their introduction in the finance space. And nobody's mentioned consumer data rights yet today. And there's nothing in the documentation in terms of Aurora's aspirations for improvement, which is part of the thing, which mentions how Aurora is going to move as we enter the new world of consumer data rights.
It's a very good point, John. Thank you. I think that's something that the panel should think about this year and take up with the CEOs.
John, is that also linked to, I guess will be linked to the smart meter rollout in Tasmania as well, where there's going to be a lot more data flow?
I think the smart meter rollout is going to happen regardless.
Yeah.
And obviously, once your bill's read, once your meter's read every 30 minutes or whatever it is under the smart meter, you've got more opportunity to do something about your energy use if you can access the data.
Yeah, correct.
And the point that I keep on making is that, and people don't realise this, we are already paying as consumers for somebody to come and read our meter. Aurora's not paying for it, and we're already paying in our bills for that data to be stored and collated into a format where a bill can be created. That's already paid for. We're only really talking about a new channel, which is on a smartphone as opposed to a computer screen, to access that data, which is already paid for, already collated, already stored, and already available on the screen in front of a call centre operator who we can ring for free. And it just seems strange for me to have to engage a person to look at my bill because I can't, when in the past I could.
It's the old consultant trick. They borrow your watch so they can tell you the time.
Indeed. We always find the Tasmanian Forum so useful because all of you are so close to the action, and it is great to hear that you do have such a close working relationship with Aurora particularly, but you know each other, you know your state, you know your consumers, and your comments are always so valuable to us. If you would also like to put in a submission, however brief, dot points, whatever, we would very much welcome that. And the link for submissions is on the website and in the invitation, I think. So we would very much welcome any further feedback. But I have to say, on behalf of the panel, today has been extremely useful. I'm sorry about the rocky start to it, but thank you for allowing us to get our teething problems done. And we really appreciate your time. We know how pressured you all are, and so we always very much appreciate your time in making yourselves available, because it really is so valuable to the panel to hear about your experiences on behalf of Tasmanian energy consumers. So thank you very, very much, and we will appreciate.
If I may, Claire, I just look, I sit on this panel in my individual capacity, not as CEO of ACOS, but I do also really want to say thank you. Extraordinary outcomes, really, both with Aurora and the community services sector. You know, Stacey, I'm looking at you and all the other, you know, Tascos and everybody. It's been a really huge year, and it's really just, you know, John, to have that kind of ongoing relationship and success and to build on what you've done. It's really something. So
Can I just conclude, you know, a gold star and an elephant stamp for Amy and all the hard work she does.
yep.
You know, I think she goes, you know, my interactions with Amy is she goes above and beyond. And, you know, CODA really appreciate the relationship that they have. I know you're only listening there, Amy, but
I hope you're smiling, Amy.
you know, you do a fantastic job.
And as you know, this
And I echo that 100%.
Here.
will go on to our website, so other people from Aurora can bask in that reflected glory as well. So thank you all very, very much, and see you next year, if not before.
Thank you.
Everyone.
See you later.
Everybody,
Have a great
thanks for your
week.
time.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Claire. Good to see you.
Yeah, same here.